start talking about what we're going to look at today until the office can figure out how to make me host so I can screen share documents with you. So today we're talking about amendments, addendums, modifications, counter offers. There are many types of accompanying documents that can be used to alter, add to, clarify contracts, but also other documents, things like requests for repairs, basically anything. Because California is such a complicated real estate state, and because it is not typical for us to have an attorney involved in our transactions like it is in most states. In fact, in most states, it's mandatory, which makes our job harder, but also, if you learn these things, can make you stand out amongst other agents if you understand them well. So these documents, like I said, we're going to go over the most common types, but anytime you have a unique situation, our state standardized library, zip forms, almost always has a form for that. Most of the time, these forms are really well written. That's why we get so many changes all the time for our forms. They're constantly modifying them for things that are confusing, don't make sense, could be modified in a way like structured so it's easier to complete properly, not miss something. So if you have a unique situation, right, zip form search toolbar is really your friend. So if you're working on new construction, on probate, anything like that, anything abnormal, if you type in the zip form search bar a keyword in relation to the type of transaction, there may be a bunch of documents that pop up, and you might not need any of them. You may need a few of them. You may need one of them. No matter what, you're going to learn a little bit more about the type of transaction you're working on. And you're going to learn a little bit more about what you may need to consider. So use that search bar in zip forms in a friendly manner. And don't go recreating the wheel. Most of the time there's a form for that. There are some specific times that I like some parts of a form, but not others, or there's no clear option to write it the way that I want to. So I will literally copy and paste. I will steal the language from that form and I'll modify it the way I want to. There's no reason for us to recreate the wheel, right? The less modification you do, the better. And I always tell you guys this in contracts class specifically, when you are using free form fields where you're writing stuff in, it is very easy to mess something up because even if you're very clear about what you mean, you need to know the cause and effect relationship between anything you add or change in any way, how it might change anything else in the transaction. And so to be very careful and make sure you run that by someone who's super familiar with contract. So that applies a lot of the time when it comes to addendums, not as much with the other forms, the other types of addendums, modifications, amendments. They are a little bit more clearly written because they're used for specific instances, but there are a lot of free form, or there is a free form section in modifications, amendments, and addendums. So since we can't screen share right now in the office, let's talk about right now counter offers, okay? And we'll look at them in a minute because counter offers I think are the easiest document to speak about. There are 3 types of counter offers. Does anyone know the 3 types of counter offers there are? Take a guess.
One could be priced.
Now that's a term on a counter offer, but that's part of a counter offer. What form do we use for a counter offer? There are 3 types of counter offers. So come on, think about it, guys. Somebody. George Morales, are you listening? Is our speaker on? Yeah. Can anyone at home hear me? Can I not hear you? Maybe. Hello? Is anyone at home listening?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. All right. We got it fixed?
I reset the password. So we're gonna see. Hold on.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we're in.
Okay,
Woohoo.
we're in. Okay, now host.
Thank you.
We're good.
All right. So the three types of counter offers are buyer counter offer, seller counter offer, and seller multiple counter offer. Okay. They all have different acronyms. Buyer counter offer is BCO. Seller counter offer is SCO. Seller multiple counter is SMCO. And there can be many of these. So there can be SCO1, BCO1, SCO2, BCO2. There can be SCMO1, BCO1, SCO2. Someone can receive, a seller can receive multiple offers, issue a multiple counter offer to all of their buyers. The buyers can respond with BCO1, and the seller says, maybe I'm going to counter just one of these.
Buyer counter.
Buyer counter offer, seller counter offer, seller multiple counter offer. So a seller can counter multiple buyers at the same time using a seller multiple counter offer. If they do not have multiple written offers that are not expired, they can only issue a seller counter offer, right? There is a huge legal delineation between multiple counter and singular counter. Okay. I'm glad there's no one in the office today saying, but what if I want to use the multiple counter offer, but I only have one offer? That is fraud. We cannot do that. So what I'm saying is there can be multiple rounds of counter offers, right? You can continue negotiations. So there can be SCO 1, 2, 3, 4, BCO 1, 2, 3, 4. There can be SCMO 1, 2. However, there can, on the flip side, let's say I have a listing, I issue seller multiple counter offer to 3 offerees. The buyers counter me all back. I now have 3 BCO 1s. I can then, with my seller, issue a secondary seller multiple counter offer. So that'd be SMCO2, or I can individually counter those buyers. However, if I individually counter them, multiple buyers can accept, and then I'm in too many binding agreements. So if I don't want to counter everyone, I can then issue a BCO1. What does that mean? It means, SCO1. That means even though I have multiple offers, we are choosing now to just counter one of our buyers. And why might I do that? Well, I might feel like I don't want to lose these other buyers, but this one buyer is so much better than the others. I want to see if we can reach an agreement before I let these other buyers, these interested buyers off the hook, right? So you can play games within this. I just want you to understand the differences and why, okay? And I want you to understand the ramifications. Once you make a seller counter offer that's singular, if that buyer accepts, you are in an escrow, right? So if it hasn't expired or the buyer hasn't countered back, I cannot engage with these other buyers I have on hold at that point, because I run the risk of putting counter offers out where more than one buyer accepts and I'm in breach of contract, right? I can't do that. So just understand the relationship between expiration date on any kind of offer or counter offer, and the difference between multiple and singular counter offers, okay?
But what's happened if you said multiple, for like 5 buyers, let's say, and 2 of them accept?
So on a multiple counter offer, there's a 2-part acceptance. Because we know that multiple buyers can accept it,
Okay.
the seller has to in turn third-party accept it on their document,
Okay.
okay? Yeah,
So if they accept, it's not like.
right. Yeah, a buyer cannot just accept a seller multiple counter offer. They have to accept, and the seller has to counter accept because more than one can accept. Yes, I'll show you.
It's a dumb question, but I guess once they both accept, then
You have your choice, or you can counter
mean,
again. If you counter again, they're probably gonna run away. Thinking you're greedy.
I think it's best just to like send it individually, right? I mean, just so
You,
whoever
okay, if
wants.
you have more than one offer, you cannot send individual SCO ones, because if the buyers accept that, you're in 2 escrows. So if you want to counter more than one buyer,
Yes,
you
so
have to send a seller multiple counter offer with that secondary acceptance, and I'm going to show you so that you understand now that I have the ability to screen share in the office.
Can I just ask you, okay, so let's say you're at an open house and you're representing the buyer. You got 2 people that want it. and they both can send in offers.
Mhm.
And then what,
That's different.
that's different than what we're saying.
Mhm.
Okay,
That document is covered under the PRBS, which is always accompanying the RPA. Possible representation of more than one buyer and seller, disclosure and consent. However, you should make any clients that could potentially be competing against one another know if you aware that you are working with more than one buyer. And you need to make sure that they're okay with it. And if they're not, you should be referring them out to an associate in the office that you like and trust and negotiating yourself a fat referral fee. Okay. And that happens often because when I pick up clients at an open house, they're all looking for the same thing, right? So if I start working with more than one buyer that I picked up at the same open house, chances are they're interested in the same product, right? So I have had this instance many times. All right. Where are we? Let me get to the right form and then I'll share. Hold on. Okay, yes.
so there are only two forms, the multiple counter offer and the singular counter offer.
That a seller can use. The buyer only has one form they can use, BCO, buyer counter offer.
Okay.
But there can be many counters, so there can be buyer counter offer 1, buyer counter offer 2, right? We can go round and round. I have literally gone up to 12 once. Eventually it got so messy, we did come to an agreement verbally and we just rewrote the contract because here's the thing, it just creates the opportunity for escrow and the lender and not title, escrow and the lender who basically work off the contract to fail somewhere, right? So we just rewrote the contract after we came down. We were like, let's not go 13 rounds. Honestly, most deals don't come together if it goes more than 2.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I've had 3, but most of the time you don't see deals coming together when it goes that many. Yeah. All right. Can everyone at home see seller multiple counter offer?
Yes, we can.
All right. So we've discussed seller multiple counter offer, seller counter offer. Hey. Why isn't this working? We
So
talked
there's-
about
so there's
issuing
no
a seller.
buyer, multiple contract.
What?
There's no buyer, multiple contract.
No, buyer doesn't have multiple sellers. They only have one seller on every property, right?
But what if a seller, like different sellers, you're submitting the proposal to different properties? And
Completely different transactions, so it doesn't
so
matter.
does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so look, here's the line for acceptance of seller multiple counter offer. So the buyer's accepting the seller multiple counter offer. And then look, section 8, this is where the seller decides which of the buyers, if they've had multiple responses, multiple acceptances to their seller multiple counter offer, this is where the seller would accept that specific buyer's offer, right? There's a 2-step acceptance on a multiple counter offer. However, most seller multiple counter offers contain what I refer to as an intangible term. Not always, but most of the time. Intangible, what's the definition of intangible, guys? Undefined, right? Okay. I often use this strategically to buy time if I'm expecting more offers to trickle in or something else. I'll use intangible words to make it tricky. No buyer can accept my seller multiple counter offer, or if I say best and highest, or 2 million or higher. I'm adding an intangible, something that's not defined. So that defies contract law. So what is the only thing a buyer can do if I include best and highest, or 2 million or higher or more? They have not make another offer, buyer counter offer. That is the best they can do. And guess what? Unless someone modifies an offer or any type of the counter offers we're discussing, all of our contracts are written with an expiration that is to be what? Sorry, hold on. Let me see here. Is this the right one? Yeah. Yeah, all expirations, whether it's on buyer counteroffer, seller counteroffer, seller multiple counteroffer, RPA, the way that they're boilerplate written is the third day at 5 p.m. after the last person initiating this document signed it. In this case, the seller's initiating a seller multiple counteroffer. That's why it says after seller is signed in paragraph 5. Okay, so if I have 2 sellers and one signed yesterday and one signed today, it's 5 p.m. 3 days from today, not from yesterday. Does that make sense? Whoever signed last, whatever the date is last here. So if I had more than one seller, they signed on different days, the expiration is calculated from the last date of signature. Okay. So does this make sense? If I want to buy time, I throw an intangible in there, right? And I leave the expiration here because chances are, not always, but chances are when the buyer responds to me, unless we're getting down to the nitty gritty and they feel like I'm like really squeezing them for every dime, chances are their agent is going to leave the expiration of their counteroffer at those 3 days. Or even if a buyer comes back to me with a counteroffer that has a tight expiration on it, I can say to them, I'm very sorry, I gave you guys all 3 days because there's several of you. We will respond to yours when I get the other responses. I'd like them sooner or later. Would you like to revise your counteroffer and send it back to me with a longer expiration so that you're still in the running? Yes.
So basically, does that mean once they receive multiple counter offers, again, that they have, basically the sellers have 72 hours to make their decision once they receive those?
No.
Okay.
The decision would be based upon the expiration time and date and frame that is in the buyer counteroffer.
Okay.
Yeah. But if, sorry, maybe I misunderstood your question. If I issued a seller multiple counteroffer, several of them, and I didn't have an intangible on there, like a buyer actually could accept my seller counteroffer, and I had several that accepted, yes, the seller would be bound to choosing one of them or countering them on the secondary line of acceptance. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go over that one again, but.
Okay, yeah. So if I issue seller multiple counteroffer, no intangibles, like a buyer can absolutely accept all of the terms in the seller multiple counteroffer. And these buyers accept. Yes, the seller is bound to accepting someone that has accepted their seller multiple counteroffer within 72 hours. Why? Because binding to both sides, the expiration of this document, which is used for acceptance or counter acceptance, right here, the counter acceptance for the seller, in the case that more than one buyer is accepted, it is still bound to the expiration identified in the same document. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's clear now? Okay, great. So you don't need to know everything about these. You can read these. I just want you to know the difference between multiple counteroffer, seller counteroffer, buyer counteroffer. What is the big difference? The really need to know difference between seller multiple counteroffer and seller counteroffer, guys.
And one buyer or multiple buyers?
That's right. You can only issue seller multiple counteroffer legally if you have more than one written offer that is not expired. Okay. So does this mean we have to care about expiration dates on buyer counteroffers? Well, yes and no. When I have 6 offers, one of them has written me that it's going to expire tomorrow at 9 a.m. I call them up and I'm like, look, I have 6 offers. I have to review with my client. I don't have, like, it's very likely not going to happen that I respond to you before 9 o'clock. Can you send me something in writing that you want to extend your buyer's offer? Do you want to send me a document? Or I have the ability still to send multiple counteroffer because I still have multiple offers that are not expired in my possession. I can actually still counter that expired offer with seller multiple counteroffer because I have the legal ability, since I have other valid offers, multiple versions. And one of the items on my counteroffer will say buyer offer is hereby extended to, and some day and time after the date I'm countering them on my seller multiple counteroffer. Does that make sense?
But we basically can extend the.
I can extend it, but I can't use that method if I only have one other offer in my possession that's not expired. If I have two, yes. Because I still have two valid buyer offers, right? So I can still use SCMO,
So the minimum,
SMCO,
the
sorry.
minimum is 2 or 3? Like
Minimum is two.
2.
Yeah. Anything more than one, valid. But if I have an expired one and I want to send an SMCO, I need to have at least two that are not expired. I need to have two, I have to have two offers in place. So what if I want to send an SMCO and I only have one valid unexpired offer and I have one that is expired? But I know this party is still interested.
Expired.
I would have to call that agent and say, I'm not going to reach it in time. If you want a counter offer, you need to send me an addendum extending your buyer's expiration. Because this is when I'm gonna be able to get to it.
It's not valid anymore.
What's that?
It wouldn't be valid anymore.
That's right, exactly. But if I have two valid, I don't have to do that. I can send everyone an SMCO. It's just that on the expired one of the terms on my counter offer needs to be buyer offer is hereby extended to, and it has to be a date and time past when I'm actually issuing that seller multiple counter offer. Just so you, what's that?
Sorry, I have a question.
Right.
So if you have the seller multiple counter offer and you get 6 of them and you decide to go with one of them, you accept one of them. You need to let all the other know?
Yes, you need to
You
pick
will
up the
call
phone.
them, you will
I
email
would
them,
call
like-
them or email them.
Okay,
I personally like to call because I want what? The relationship
relationship.
with the agent. Also, I probably want a fucking backup offer if I have 6.
yeah.
So, agent, I love you. Somebody else came in with an unbelievable offer against my advice. My sellers decided to accept this offer. I am very sorry. I would love to offer you backup position. Here are the terms I would need for my client to accept backup. Would you like to check with your clients and see if they're interested in backup offer? Okay. We're going to also discuss backup offer again in this class today. I have a copy of it here. Yes.
Have you ever done a deal where the seller who you're representing accept a lesser offer?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I have absolutely had sellers accept lesser offers, usually because they're much stronger, the type of loan, who's representing them, my feedback on how the buyers behaved during showings and open houses, the conduct of the agent. A lot of it has to do with my opinion. I call all of the lenders from the pre-qual letters that are submitted with the offers. I give my sellers my opinion of how I felt about those lenders. If some of them don't fucking call me back, I'll pick up the phone for that poor buyer agent. I'll be like, dude, your buyer's lender is not calling me back. I'm gonna have to tell my seller that. Do you want to talk to them or do you want to get a pre-qual letter from someone else that is competent and does care?
So
Right?
it's not always the highest bidder.
No, terms are very important. The strength of the financing and the buyer. I also look at proof of funds and I'm like, hey, look, seller, this buyer could buy this property cash if they wanted to. If we can get this person up to our highest number, let's try to do that because they look very financially solid to me. They're not as high as our other, buyer, but that buyer has traditional financing. Maybe it's weak, maybe it's not, but I like someone, and this is how I convince my buyers, show me all the money. Let's show the seller all the money. It doesn't mean you're gonna pay more. They know you have a good agent who's not gonna let you overpay, but let's show them all the money.
Can I ask you a question, Kristen? Okay, so this is kind of like a random, I think it may, hi, she's the best. So I ran into this situation where I submitted an offer, there were other offers involved. We ended up getting the offer, right? But instead of replying with the single counter offer from the seller, she replied with a seller multiple counter offer. And then I said, no, since you didn't count the others, you need to do what you're supposed to because you're on the counter and us. But she was saying, oh no, but we have multiple counters. So I was just kind of confused. And now I think it makes sense what you said about it.
She's probably wrong, but I would say, fine, I don't fucking care. I accepted it. Make sure your seller accepts it in the counter selection section.
I did. But I just wanna, I think.
What do I always
what you were
say? You don't have
saying.
to be right. You've got to get it accepted, right? And correcting the other agent, especially the listing agent, is not the way to get your buyer offer accepted. So
Correct.
it's a little risky because if it's SMCO, she could be lying and be trying to buy some time. But I don't care as
Correct.
long as I'm getting accepted. So it's that fine balance of, do I need to correct this agent? Does it put my client at risk? Does it hurt? Are they just incompetent? Does pointing out that incompetence hurt my client? Most of the
Yeah.
time, that is going to hurt your client. So
It's okay. I closed, but I just wanted to, I think it makes sense what you said at the beginning, that maybe that's her mindset about that issue.
yes,
So I wanted to go back with, so let's say you did have a client or a buyer that has enough money to pay for that loan, right? You want to get them to the number that, you know, you guys want to reach at. You would then put intangible terms in that.
now I
So
use
multiple-
intangible terms when I want to buy time.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm using them because I truly want best or highest, or I have a number and I'm telling everyone, hey, I've got my 2 million. So you 2 million or beat it,
Yeah,
plus whatever other terms I want.
okay.
Okay, here's seller singular counter offer. I just want you to see it, okay? And here is buyer counter offer. I just want you to see it. Okay. You can add addendums, which we'll also cover in this class, to counter offers, because sometimes what you need to say won't fit in these lines. Okay, terms in your counter offers are as important as terms in your purchase agreement and listing contract. So do not try to fit it. If it doesn't fit, you use an addendum. Okay, do not try to force it. Use an addendum. Second thing I'd like to point out. When a seller receives an offer, whether it's multiple offers or a singular one, if they're countering anyone in any way, they're technically supposed to sign the residential purchase agreement and check a box in it that says, we accept subject to the attached counter offer or seller multiple counter offer. Most agents don't do this, particularly in multiple counter offer situations, because it's a lot of fucking work and you're only gonna end up with one buyer. So that's pretty normal, but you need to remember to go back, ask that agent, hey, can I get the fully signed RPA? Most of the time, they're just gonna issue that, the seller counter or the seller multiple counter offer, right? Because they're busy. I do it too. It's not the right way. If I'm only countering 1 or 2 people, I'll do it the right way where I have my seller sign both of the RPAs and I'll check that box that says sellers accepted, subject to the attached multiple counter offer or singular counter, SCO. Same thing goes for counter offers. So if I'm countering a counter, whether I'm buyer or seller, multiple or singular, if you're countering a counter, your client signs the counter you've received, okay? And this box is checked right here, okay? This box is so important that when I do DocuSign, I make it for me to check. And I put me before the client, okay? So when you are in counters, every type of counter, unless you're completely accepting, okay? If you are responding any way other than acceptance to a counter offer or a purchase agreement, there is a box for that, and this is that box, and missing this box, what does that mean you've done?
You accept it?
It means you've accepted, you're not countering, and you have just made a fatal error, absolutely fatal error, okay? So this box, though it is small, is mighty, okay? Small but mighty. This is not something you check for the client to DocuSign. You check this box, and you check this box and you look at it before you send it to your client, okay? When I send my client contracts, I put myself as signer number 1, and I put the next, like if it's a husband and wife, I put them as 2 and 2. You can have more than one number. Like if I have 3 signers, I can have me as a signer as 1, my clients both as 2, because they'll want to look at it at the same time and talk about it. If you send it to them 2 and 3, they'll be like, oh, my husband didn't get it. Send it to your decision makers on your side at the same time, same number. And let's say I'm using a transaction coordinator. I want it to go out to my assistant. I'll put number 3 so that that person gets it when it's all signed. but there's a section at the right on DocuSign that says receives a copy. You know this, right? We did this yesterday. All right. We good? You don't need to understand everything about it. I just want you to understand the legality of it, what's important, how it's done, and the difference between multiple and singular. All right. Let's go up to the top. All right, addendum. There is another document very similar to addendum that we're going to look at the same time. Amendment. Can anyone take a guess at the difference between an amendment and an addendum?
Guess you're adding something to the contract.
Yes, but there's specific time or reason why it would be done one way or the other. Yes, it's on hand.
I'm coming from a different state, so correct me if I'm wrong. But an addendum usually comes at the end of an offer if you have extra provisions, or an addendum for like a condo sale, there's usually condo documents. An amendment
Yeah.
is changing the terms.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if that's usually after the offer, or are you going to that?
It is.
Okay.
Exactly the difference. Keywords, amend means to change. You can only change something that has already been agreed upon. So after you have any term, RPA, negotiation for inspection, anything you have negotiated in a form that has become contractual, that needs to be changed or even added to, if that term is addressed in any way in an agreement that is already signed, it must be amended. Whereas an addendum, the key word is add. We have not agreed yet. I am adding some terms, some language to whatever I am still trying to negotiate, whatever I'm proposing, okay? Keywords, add or amend, and be careful, because there's a lot of boilerplate stuff in our residential purchase agreement and other documents that we might not have to fill anything out on, but it is already addressed in our written agreement. So if you're going to use an addendum, you would better make sure that it is not referring to anything that is already within our contract or subsequent documents. That is a heavy one, right? You can call me.
So it's adding to the document.
So if I'm writing an offer and one of the terms that I want to put into my contract can't fit on the space, or there isn't a space for that, or I don't like the way it's written, or it's something kind of complicated, I'm adding an addendum. Yeah. There's some addendums are boilerplate for common situations, like if you're making a contingent offer where the buyer says, yes, seller, I'll buy your house, but only if I can sell mine. Here are the terms about that. Or backup offer addendum, which we'll look at. Okay. Or a probate sale addendum, or if there is a pre-form addendum for it, it's going to be in zip forms. So if you want to know about all the different kinds of addendums there are, where could you figure that out? Go to zip forms, document section, go to the search bar, type in the word addendum. Learn about every single fucking addendum that exists. You'll be more schooled on it than I will, because a lot of them have to do with leases and shit like that, like weird stuff that we wouldn't typically deal with. Like leases after they're under agreement. So type in keyword addendum, you'll learn all about them. We're just going over the very common ones today. All right, so addendum, here's the key thing. In all counteroffers, addendums, modifications, all add-on documents, at the top, you're going to be identifying what you're attaching it to. What is it an amendment to? What is it in addition to? What is this a backup offer for? It's in relation to my RPA, or it's in relation to a counteroffer issue, right? Whatever the most recent part of that negotiation or process is, whatever this is being added to, you need to identify up here what it's being added to. So there's boxes for residential lease, transfer disclosure statement, but this addendum could be an addendum to anything I've written. It could be an addendum to an addendum. It could.
Yeah.
So you check other, and then you find the title of that document at the top of it. You write it here and then date it. Now, when we're talking about a residential purchase agreement, you guys are taking class with me. The legal reference date in the top left-hand corner, the date that you actually wrote the contract, not had it signed, not had it accepted, not had it countered, that's a legal reference date. That's the date that would go here. However, what if I'm doing an addendum to an addendum? I don't see a legal reference date at the top left. Well, I typically go with the date it was signed. So if this addendum was an addendum to another addendum, I'm going to look at the date here on that other addendum. If it's an addendum to a TDS, I'm going to look at the date that the TDS was signed, unless it has a dated box for the date that I actually drafted that document. Okay. Why do some documents have a legal reference date in the top left and some don't? Well, a lot of them are boilerplate and a lot of them are very custom. And you'll find that the more custom ones, like addendum, don't necessarily have a created date, because it's very typical for us to take several days to actually draft something free-form like this. So identification of what you're amending, adding to, countering will always be very important and very clear. And we're not going to go over this today because I do this in the inspections and negotiations class, but one of the most sensitive reference sections of any document is in the request for repair and response to request for repair documents that are used at the time of wrapping up our investigation, contingency, and inspections, if we're making any request. Because you're basically making an offer to lift contingencies in exchange for the seller providing a credit, making repairs, reduction of purchase price, something like that. And if I make I'm including a contingency removal form with it, okay? I'm saying, seller, I'm lifting this investigation contingency, or maybe even all contingencies, if you agree to give my buyer what they want, right? I'm dangling a carrot. This is very important for me. But if I make that contingency removal part of the, an attachment to the residential purchase agreement, even though it is in accordance with the terms of the residential purchase agreement, that's just a contingency removal. Seller doesn't have to do shit for me, and I no longer have contingencies. I fucked up. That contingency removal is what? It's an amendment, or it's an addendum to my request for repair. This contingency removal only applies if seller signs my request for repair. That makes sense? Okay, so I'll cover that in inspection and negotiation class, but I want you to know why this section up here, talking about referring to what we're changing or adding to, or making something conditional upon, is so important. Very important. All right. Oops. Next document, additional signature addendum. What happens if you have so many buyers or sellers or agents that you don't have places for people to sign? Well, you can try to creatively figure it out. You can manually type it in on DocuSign onto your documents, but that's very time consuming. Well, we have a form for that, additional signature addendum. Okay, so it can be for a buyer, a seller, landlord, tenant, other, broker, agent. I'm not even going to go through this because it's very self-explanatory. Also, just so you know, not for counter offers. Remember, we talked about the box for counter offer. That's so important. Whatever document we're countering, we have to check the box. We have to sign that original document we're countering and sign the box that says we're subject to the attached counter. When you have something that you're attaching to an RPA, like a backup offer addendum, an additional signature addendum, there is a place in the contract for you to check a box to say that document's attached to it, and that must be checked also. Does that make sense? If you don't check a box on the RPA that you're adding something to, or that RR, that request for repair that you're adding to, you don't check a box and say that there's something attached to it, then there's nothing attached to it. Okay. And I have actually gotten my buyer out of the deal like at the last minute because the seller sent me an addendum to a counter offer, but they didn't identify that that addendum was part of their counter offer. And I knew that at the time, and I signed it. I didn't say anything to anyone, and I do this all the time in real estate. And my buyer wanted to cancel at the very last minute based upon what was in the addendum. And because the listing agent didn't say that addendum was part of our counter offer, it was non-binding. It was not part of our agreement, and it was really shitty, and I felt horrible, but my duty is to protect my client, and they wanted another deal, and I had to wait for them. So a lot of times I will sit on errors like that. And if you have a deal with another agent like me, I don't want to do it to you, but I will if I need to. This is why it's so important that you guys know these things, and until you know them, that's okay. You have a mentor, you have me, you have micro results to look at, okay? Look, double check, have someone else look at it if you make additions, if you make changes. All right, don't be scared. I love you guys. I'm here. All right, now we have backup offer addendum. Okay, so if you're making a backup offer, it could be to a counter offer or to a purchase agreement.
And so there.
Could be in that bag.
What's the bag?
Someone has more than a, let's not go in someone's bag.
Yeah, it's,
That's okay. I'm taking a risk already. but-
Oh, it's okay.
You want me to go in?
It's okay. She's probably using the restroom. She doesn't have her phone. So they're getting water, coffee, or using the restroom. She's using the restroom. Let her be. Sorry, we have an alarm going off. We can all still hear, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can also hear backup offer addendum. So unfortunately, your buyer's offer did not get accepted. But take a backup offer. Why? No obligation to the buyer. Obligation to the seller only. Your buyer can always still say, haha, just kidding, if the seller comes back around to them. But they have to come back around to you and give it to you based on the terms you've negotiated if this is signed. That, by the way, 33% of escrows fail. So if you are in backup position number one, what is your buyer's chances of becoming the buyer?
increases.
Oh, what? 1 in 3. 1 in 3. Backup offer every time. If you can get it, go for it. That's a 33% chance that you still end up with that property. All right, so I say what this is an amendment or addendum to. Sorry, guys. I fill it out, and there are some pretty important terms on here. Okay, so it says that for buyer seller, if seller is unable to provide signed cancellations and releases to buyer to blank date, then either party may cancel the agreement in writing. It's putting a deadline on it. It's saying that if the seller doesn't offer us backup within a certain time frame, this is basically null and void. I like to make this long because if I'm writing this, who do I rep? The buyer. And do they have any obligation? No. So I want to lock that seller up. I have one, like a super high-end property right now. I'm lucky because they've had a problematic escrow. I still have a crack at getting my buyers into it because I actually stuck 90 days on here instead of the 30 that I think a lot of agents do. Because the seller wouldn't have to offer us backup at this point if it had been beyond 30 days, and it has. So if I'm writing this, I don't mind 30. I don't even mind 120. Listing agent might have an issue with that. I don't know.
So that's when the backup offers.
Expires, yeah. The backup offer has an expiration date usually set by the buyer, and usually the listing agent and seller don't give it much thought. I like it long because I I like a long expiration period because my buyer has no obligation to purchase it, but the seller has the obligation to offer it to me every time.
That's good.
Yeah, exactly. I'm writing in my buyer's favor.
What if during this period your buyer will find something?
Fine, no problem. You can, if the listing agent calls me and says, oh, we're gonna cancel, you guys still ready to go? Nah, sorry, we found something else. Oh, okay. Yep.
Oh, it's not an obligation.
Yep, not an obligation and not obligatory to the buyer, just to the seller. Okay, and then it talks about if time periods in the agreement should be handled one way or another. Leave it alone. What it's talking about is should contingencies be counted from the day the backup offer was accepted or from the date that the seller gave you signed cancellations of their current escrow when you opened escrow with them. It should go from when you opened escrow with them, right? Because you can't control that time frame, so you leave this section alone. That's it. That's it on backup offer, guys. There's a section so that if the seller does cancel with their current buyer, they have to notify you in this section. They have to give you signed cancellation of their other escrow, because you can't have two escrows legally. And you don't want to bind your buyer up and give your buyer's deposit funds up if the seller hasn't actually canceled with their other buyer, right? So that's what the section is about, is receiving a notice of the signed cancellation and release of prior transaction. And the seller saying they've given it to you. Okay. Next up. Extension of time addendum. So we have expirations and we have contingencies all over the place. Hey, remember I talked about countering a buyer's expiration if you're the listing agent? If I instead wanted to tell the buyer's agent to extend the expiration of their offer, guess what form they could use?
Other than,
They could extend the expiration of their residential purchase agreement. So they could do one document and send it over to me. Why would I want that? Because if I only had one other offer, I really want to be able to issue a seller multiple counter offer.
That
So,
allows you to
yeah.
get more offers coming in.
Well, it allows me to issue the seller multiple counter offer. Let's say I have one expire, but that's because they were being aggressive or something, like they're still around, they're still interested, and I have one other offer. I'll call up that agent and say, hey, I have one other offer. That's why I didn't respond to yours. I knew this was coming in. I told you that. So if you want me to respond to yours, I need an
how long
extension of
is that
time.
extension though?
However you write it. It's as
Because
long as you write
that
it,
should
love.
be easier than rewriting the contract again, right?
You don't rewrite the contract anyways. You would add an addendum if you were buyer's agent, but you don't need to, because there is the perfect addendum that is set up just for this situation. Remember, I told you zip forms like for common situations, they almost always have a form for that. So this can be used to extend the expiration of a purchase agreement. This can be used to extend, what else, guys? Read it. Contingency timeframes, very common.
So the reason why you would want to extend is, is because, and you would want to, show the buyer that you have multiple, because you just want to like make it a little more. you
No,
wanna show
I'm
them-
saying legitimately,
Yes,
yo, agent of
Yes.
expired buyer offer. I have another offer. I told you I was, and I told you I was waiting. Do you want me to respond to your buyer? Are they still around? Because I'm only gonna do one round, we're only gonna do one round of counters, so I can either singularly counter the one person, or
got it, it's for both.
you can
Yeah.
send me an extension so that I can counter you both at the same time. And guess what? They're gonna send me an extension.
So the seller will accept like one offer and you can accept also like a backup offer, like you can say like, okay.
Yeah, I can
accept
have
your-
backup 1, backup 2, backup 3, backup 4, backup 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 20, 100.
And then like, let's say like I accept your offer and I accept your backup offer. It means like if. her
If you
escrow-
cancel, you are legally obligated to open escrow with me. And if we cancel, or I say, just kidding, you are legally obligated to open escrow with backup
So what
offer
is it like,
too.
oh, Christine, we got your offer, but you are like backup number 3?
You can't choose me. You have to go to backup 1. They have to pass or cancel. Backup 2, they have to pass or cancel. Me is backup 3. You can only open escrow with me if you have failed to open
Yeah.
escrow or canceled with 1 and 2.
Yeah, but in the time of decisions, I'm getting all the offer and I accept someone and I want to keep all of them on like, just in case. I tell them like, you're number 1, 2, 3.
It literally, I'll show you on the form. Yes, it's, here. Right here. This agreement is in backup position number
Okay.
blank.
Okay,
That has to be filled out.
And that is based on how much your seller likes the person or likes the.
I
position.
mean, if I only have one backup offer, they're always in one. But if I'm countering multiples, I can counter them and say, I'm countering you for backup 2.
Yeah, and that's based on the position, how you feel about their offer.
How I'd counter them, yes, but how they're positioned is literally how they're positioned. If I accept a backup offer one and someone else better comes in, they can never be anything better than backup two. Because I have a legal binding agreement with backup one. I cannot kick backup one out unless that time frame that we talked about has expired.
Has that I'm sure that has happened many times where.
I don't know, most of the time I've moved on, like, I'm
Okay.
sure it's happened, but
Yeah.
like,
You want to sell it,
yeah.
okay.
All right, so most commonly, this form is actually used to extend contingency deadlines. Because it's like, right now I am in an escrow where the seller doesn't have a utility on, so I can't finish inspecting. So right now, we just have a gentleman's agreement. That's because nobody's wanted to buy this property. My buyers are the only buyers, so I'm not really too worried about this. Also, it's because of fault of seller. I have proof that all contingencies have been delayed due to seller failing to perform a contract. So I could actually send a notice to perform if I wanted to the seller because they're not making property available for inspection. That is one of the obligations of seller in a residential purchase agreement, unless otherwise negotiated, which I have no fucking clue why you'd ever negotiate otherwise. But so you can extend contingency. So this might be like, look, listing agent, my buyer's lender sucks. We've just found this out. I know we're only a week into our escrow, but I've convinced them to work with my preferred lender. My preferred lender says he is going to try to still get everything done within the same time frame in our contract. But I'm being really open and honest with you. I'm happy for you to talk to him. Do you think that your sellers would be open to giving us a 3-day extension just so we can do everything by the book and get it done for you? And I like to be above board and be honest. Most of the time when you go to an agent, you give them truthful information. You preemptively ask them. You don't ask them when something's due or the day after, or after you've been dodging their calls at 5 o'clock. When you look ahead and you preemptively see a problem, most of the time they'll say, yeah, no problem. Or, you know what, if it comes down to that, we'll get you an extension at the moment, or we're not gonna enforce it. We'll just serve you a notice to perform if it's more than a few days after what it should be. When I talk, like, I know who you are. Like you're legit. That level of trust and competence between agents is very important, right? But you only get that when you are honest and you look at future problems or problems you have, even if they're corrected, and how they can affect things, and you tip the other parties off. We're in this together, right? It's called cooperating broker, right? We want the same thing. Even if our clients have very differing viewpoints, we want the same thing. And as long as you're honest and open and there's a real reason for it, most of the time people will go ahead and sign this very happily or say, no need, you're fine. Let's see here. Additional terms. See, there's a section here where you can modify anything here. Just be careful with freeform stuff like I've told you. Modification of listing. So we've already talked about amendment and addendum. Those are for escrows. Those are for once an RPA is created. What if you need to change something, including a time frame or term with just between you and the seller in a listing agreement? There's a form for that. It's called modification of listing, buyer representation, or other agreement between principal and broker. So it's not just for you and seller listing agreement. There's one other common singular contract agreement between agent and principal. Principal means like your client. That can be buyer representation agreement. I don't particularly use them because I don't like them, but they have just changed them. They've made some massive changes to the buyer representation agreement this year that I like a lot more. I still probably won't use them. However, I would be much more likely to use them now that the state has made the massive changes they have. We will review those together. I will have a class to go over the RPA changes after the first of the year. And I will have a secondary class to review the changes of the documents that we use that have been changed after the first of the year also, okay? I just want you to know, if you're modifying anything, that's an agreement between just you and your client, this is the document you use. Okay, so if you are changing, if you're getting a price reduction. I've had people get that in writing in an email from their client, and they go change it in the MLS. No, you have a contract that stipulates the price. You have to have something modifying your contract that's signed in order to do that. Okay, so anytime you modify an agreement between anyone, even if it's just you and your client, even if you have it in writing, you have to have it contractually bound. And this is the form for that. Amendment of existing agreement terms, we've already discussed this. Just like addendum, very important that we identify what it's changing. But the key difference is we're not adding to something that's not yet agreed to. We are changing something that has already been agreed to. And when we change something, the difference about an amendment is whoever we're changing something with has to accept it, right? An addendum, no one has to accept because it's coming from one party. The other party still has the opportunity to counter, agree, or disagree to it. Well, in an amendment, everyone's already agreed to. So it is technically a new negotiation, even if everyone wants it. So we have to prove that the other party wants this. And so it has an expiration, which I hate. Because if we issue these most of the time, everyone's totally in agreement. It has an expiration, so if you have a lazy agent on the other side, you have to be like, bro, get the sign, otherwise I have to redraft it, which I hate. And he's like, why? It's not important. We all agree to it. We all want it. I'm like, because there's an expiration on it. Now, that happened last year or the year before. And that the other party has to, whoever, like if the buyer's issuing it, buyer's agent's issuing it, then seller's accepting it. Vice versa. If the listing agent and seller are issuing it, the buyer's accepting it. Doesn't really matter, because like I said, most of the time on an amendment, you're doing it because you need to, like, to make something work, like everyone's in agreement. You don't draft this document unless you've pre-negotiated what goes in this document, okay? So very key. Amendments are not meant to reopen negotiations. Something needs to be negotiated, or there's a problem that comes up that everyone needs to solve together. You are resolving that verbally. You are pre-negotiating the terms of that, and then you're going to draft an amendment. You don't reopen negotiations once a contract or counter offers have been accepted. Moving forward, seller counter offer we've discussed, multiple counter offer we've discussed. Buyer counter offer we've discussed. That's it. So that is the most common types of amendments, addendums, modifications, and counters. Okay, but what should you do now?
Go to your mentor and practice.
Well, I don't think there's anything else to practice. I don't think like this is really a practice activity. You should read these.
Yeah.
You should print them out. You should understand the difference. You should put notes on them about what the differences are.
Or you can roll play.
Yeah. What else should you do? You should probably go into zip forms and search in the search bar and type in the keywords modification, addendum, amendment, and see what other kinds there are, just so you're aware. Even if you don't understand what they mean or if you need them, just having it rolling around in your head, the fact that they exist. What if you go right on a probate sale 3 months from now and you're like, oh, I seem to recall I need a probate addendum. I don't know if the listing agent needs to do that or me, right? At least you know it exists. You don't need to know the answer. You just have to have the thought that there's something I should probably check. That's it. Yes.
Is it possible? You
Yeah, I'll print one.
Or send by your email.
We can go to Clark.
Good, you have zip forms. Richard, I think is text challenge. You guys are not, huh? Just, this is Richard's and Richard's alone.
Yeah.
The rest of you know how to print.
Still kind of weak on the zip forms. Thank you.
You don't know how to print a document from zip forms.
No, I said, call you all the time and ask